Well, it is a pleasure. My nieces are going to think that I am the coolest today because I have Chelsie Hightower with me on the podcast. It's good to be here with you.
It's so good to be here. Thanks for coming
oh my
to
gosh.
my house.
Yes, my sister Jenny, I remember she used to always talk about you before I really knew who you were. And she'd be like, you got to see the girl from Orem on Dancing with the Stars. Like, she'd show me all the time, all excited. But so this is gonna be her favorite episode.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I'm happy to be here.
Well, it's fun for me. We have a lot of things in common. I grew up in a family with 5 brothers, which is the same as you did.
Yes.
And there's a lot that comes with that. There's a lot of unique characteristics to a family that big. Do you have any sisters or just the 5 brothers?
No, I am the youngest of 5 older brothers.
So your parents were like, we're going till we get a little girl.
I think initially they thought that. By the time my mom got to her 5th boy, I think she'd given up on the idea of ever having a daughter. So much so that actually when the doctor came in to talk to her that morning when she went into labor with me, he was like, I had a feeling we're LDS. So he was saying his morning prayers. He said, I had a feeling that you're going to have a girl. She's like, well, I hate to shake your faith, but I don't have girls. She's like, I don't want to break your testimony. But alas, here I am. Well, her only girl. She was very excited to dress me up.
Oh, I bet.
And only to find out that I wanted nothing to do with dress ups and dresses and anything.
So you weren't like a girly girl when you were little?
No, not at all. I hated, actually, I was so much so that I hated dancing. I just wanted to be like my brothers. My brothers got a hockey stick one year for Easter and I got a dress. And I cried. I just wanted that hockey stick like all my brothers. But yeah.
You remind me of my little niece, Lila. She's got 3 older brothers and, they'll all be playing sports or roughing around and she tries to jump in every single time. Yeah. And she's she does her little dance thing or whatever. But I think little girls are so cute when they dance. I love going to my niece's recitals or whatever. So were you that little kid, 4 or 5 years old, 3 years old, dancing around?
Yes, my mother attempted one time and I got on stage and I didn't move. I mean, when I say I hated dancing,
please tell me you have video.
We only have photos, which is so sad, but you'll see all the other girls in motion and I'm just like stone cold face, wouldn't move a muscle. I mean, and I was really shy when I was little, so I think that played into it, but yeah, man, I didn't enjoy it.
So what clicked? I mean, obviously you eventually became quite the dancer. So at what age were you? Oh, it's funny. Actually pretty good at this.
Yeah, no, it's hilarious because I always think that if somebody had told my mom when I was 6, 7, 8 that I was going to grow up to dance on national television, she wouldn't have believed it. She would have thrown up in her mouth a little bit, I think. But I was 9 years old, and my elementary school had a ballroom program, and I remember watching. They had like their end of the year performance, and I remember watching one person in particular who's actually still a good friend of mine who still dances. He danced for Cher and lots of people, but his name is James Toyleva. You might know him.
I don't know if I do. I don't think so.
Okay, so anyways, I watched him. He was a year older than me, and I was like, man, that just looks so cool. Something about ballroom that really struck me. It was the only elementary school in America at the time to have a ballroom program. And something about that at age 9 really interested me, and so I started. My mom was shocked that I was interested in it, but yeah.
Well, that's crazy. At 9 years old, you're in the only elementary school in the entire country that had ballroom dancing.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're familiar with Bill Gates' story. When he moved to Seattle, his family had this weird situation that caused them to move to Seattle, and he was right next to like one of the only universities that gave public access to these early computers that were, it's kind of how he got into coding and all that kind of stuff.
So interesting.
Kind of crazy.
Well, it's funny because my parents actually almost moved into a house that would have put me in a boundary for a different elementary school. They said they got there to sign the papers and they said they just had a bad feeling about it, and there was nothing wrong with the house. The next day they found this other house, and that was really the only difference, that between the 2 houses, that other house put me in that school district to be in that school that had the program. That was the only difference between the 2 houses. And so I've always really believed that everything in my life has worked very fortuitously for me to do exactly what I did and to be where I'm at and to go wherever I end up going. But yeah, it's really cool.
No, I totally believe in that stuff. And it's funny, as a realtor, right? I'm listening to that story and I'm like, oh man, you're at the closing table.
Yes.
Like we just feel like this isn't the house. You're like, okay, well, let's keep looking.
Yeah, that must have been pretty disappointing.
It doesn't happen very often. It's only happened a couple times. In fact, I think the only time I walked away from the closing table was my own deal. I was letting a friend do the loan, and needless to say, he was new, so I was trying to help him. and he didn't know what he was doing, and I couldn't sign the loan because of how bad the loan was, and I ended up losing my $1,000 earnest money. But bless your parents. Well, so you grew up in this environment. All of a sudden, you're 9 years old. You get into ballroom, and within 2 years, you're winning the national championship.
Yeah, another shocking thing. I was actually one of the last kids in class to understand the steps, and to really pick up the steps. And one of my, things in my crosses to bear my whole life has been my own self-doubt and my own lack of this innate belief in myself that I can do things. And so I've really had to work hard to overcome those things to be able to accomplish what I have accomplished. But I was that kid in class who was like looking at everybody else thinking, why do they all know the steps and I don't know the steps and I can't get them? And I'm just like, I was so nervous. And so it took me a little bit to like get over that hump. And once I finally did, it just clicked. And it was just like, it feels like it's something I've been doing forever. And I think that's, it was a gift,
Yeah. And so 11 years old, I mean, are you touring the country to do this, or how do you win a national championship in
so they actually dancing, have a national competition down in Provo.
Oh, okay.
So it's one of the biggest ones in the United States, and people come from all over the country.
And so you win that, and then you started touring like a Team USA team as well, right?
Yeah, so that was after I had kind of left the ballroom world for a little bit, and I went into jazz and ballet. Long story short, loved that, never wanted to go back to ballroom. Ended up getting an amazing opportunity to get sponsored training from a great family out in Alpine who sponsored my training from some of the best coaches in the world. So at 14 years old, coming from a family who did not have the means to, by any means, to support me in that, to be able to pay for these lessons, I got this amazing opportunity to get sponsored training.
You were basically the partner of the kid from Alpine. Is that how that worked out? Yeah, so my niece Shaylee, she did ballroom in junior high and elementary. And I mean, they're touring all over the place. It seems expensive. I never asked my brother about the bill. But
yeah, oh man, it's crazy. It's like, easily you could spend $100,000 in a year between training and dresses and competing and everything else. So yeah.
So it's one of those sports that weeds people out, I'm guessing, pretty quick. Because if you're not very good, I mean, mom and dad are only going to be writing these big checks for so long.
Yeah, and I think the dance world is already expensive. I think it's become a little bit more accessible now that it's like a little bit more well known. There's local teachers here around Utah and where, it's more accessible, but it's still crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's, I can only imagine.
Yeah.
Well, and so then at what point did you know, okay, I'm going to go do, because one of the reason I love your story, we've been friends for a while now. And as I've followed and kind of seen what your path has done, it's just so cool to me because for me, the ultimate achievement in life is to pursue your passion and achieve it at the highest levels. And that's what you've done. Like every little girl that's ever been born basically has wanted to dance on TV. I mean, you dance in front of 24 million people, right?
Yeah.
And to be able to live out that dream, at what age did you know, like, you know what, I'm going to go for this. I have something special here. Or was it simply you just kept pushing as hard as you could?
I think by the time I was in 6th grade, I was sure I wanted to go to BYU and be on their Black Bull touring team. And then once I got more into it and I started competing around the country, I wanted more than that. I wanted to be a world champion. And so that was about 14, 15. And I had amazing coaches who really believed in me. And again, like I needed that. I needed people to believe in me. I think some people have this innate sense of confidence in themselves, and it's beautiful. And I really needed people to believe in me. I needed people to encourage me. And I had amazing coaches who did that. And who just told me I could do whatever I wanted to do and I could go as far as I wanted to go. And that meant a lot to me. But so by the time I was 14, 15, I wanted to be a world champion. And then by the time I was 16, when So You Think You Can Dance first came on air, that's what I knew I wanted to do. And that's what I felt like, man, I feel like everything has led me to doing something like that with my training, with the opportunities that have been open to me. And that came to me. I just knew that was what I wanted to do.
Well, I was going to say the timing of that was really fortuitous because I was going to say right when you said, 14, 15, I started thinking in my head, well, you were on season 4. So that was about that time because you auditioned when you were 18 years old, right? And so you watch it come on the TV and you're like, that's my goal.
Yeah. And I had a hard time really committing to like the ballroom world because it is very cutthroat and very intense and a lot of things that didn't jive with my personality. Yet I felt like I had to take on those characteristics to be able to be successful in that. Because I wasn't going to just halfway do it. I wanted to, if I was going to do it, I wanted to be one of the best. And so I had a hard time, like, because I was like, I want to be one of the best, yet there's something in my heart that's not, it doesn't match up with what I truly want at the end of the day. And so I don't know, the TV world I felt like was an opportunity for me to have a bigger purpose and to be able to be in front of a lot of people and to be able to have more meaning behind it than just a title. I don't know.
Well, I think it's the beauty of 2019, the world we live in now, is if you want anything that you want to do, there's an opportunity to create a platform. Like when I very first, I started doing stand-up comedy back in 2004. And you had to get on stages. There wasn't a platform. YouTube wasn't even out yet, right?
Yeah.
It was like you had to get discovered still. Music, you still had to get discovered. But we live in a world now where I love that you were able to look at the TV and literally go, okay, there's my platform. I know how I can now be seen. And because you do need to share whatever your message is going to be of your life, the bigger the platform, the better, the more people you can share it with. So did you audition once or did you?
Yes, one time. I was 18 and I was like, if this doesn't work out, I'm coming back next year. Cause I recognized that I was still young. And so I felt like, if it's meant to be and if I'm ready and if everything that I've worked for in my life, if it's the right time, then it's going to work out. And it did, but I knew it was going to happen.
Were you nervous for the audition?
I was terrified. But I really did know that at some point it was going to work out, whether that be then or later. But, oh yeah, I was so nervous for the audition. I remember sitting in my chair and I was actually one of the very last. So I'd waited all day, hours and hours, just watching people get cut and cut.
Just one after another, people go out and dance. And
then, just thousands of people in front of me. And so, yeah, I was the last group of the day. And I remember the group right before me, the executive producer got up. So he's one of the executives is the first cut.
Okay.
So he's like before you get to Nigel and Mary, he's like the one that goes, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. And he got a whole group on stage and he came up and he's like, all right, raise your hand if you are better than these dancers here. And so, of course, like so many people raise their hand. He's like, if you're not better than this group of dancers, walk out right now. Because he cut the whole group. And so there was a lot of like intimidation factors playing into it.
That is so intimidating. That was right before you got up to give your...
Yeah, so I remember sitting in my chair and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so nervous. Who am I? What am I doing? It was just like the whole like bout of self-doubt. And then I remember right before I got up there, I just said, just dance, just dance. And that was those two words really were the only things that I needed to just have that courage to get up on stage and just dance.
I love that.
And yeah, because I think it took out all the things that I couldn't control. And it was like, just do what you know how to do. That's all you need. And that's enough. And so, it was
But there's so much genius in that, right? I think so many times in life we get caught up in different details of things, and you hear top athletes and performers and musicians. It's at the end of the day, you just have to block everything out and just do your thing. Just get up there and do it.
Yeah, and that is one thing that I learned that was crucial for performing under pressure on a consistent basis, was that you really have to learn how to just focus on the things that you can control. And that was my first experience with that moment. That was like that first experience that kind of carved the path for the way that I continue to go. So
did that become your routine as you were on all these shows, obviously, So You Can Think You Can Dance and later Dancing with the Stars? Did you have a routine or something that you would tell yourself? Like, Tony Robbins talks about getting into state or having like every time you walk through a doorway, you get into this state or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Did you have something like that?
Yeah, there was always, knowing my purpose was big, knowing what I was there for was big, and knowing who I was the biggest. It was always, again, because I really had to overcome those self-doubt and that vulnerability that I had within me. I had to be so much more present and in the moment, and so much a really, really strong sense of who I was and what my purpose was, and ultimately what my ultimate goal was. And so it was before any dance performance, I don't know if there was anything that I can recall that was anything specific, but I did a lot of visualization. I would visualize, and it was a very detailed visualization.
Well, you talked about this bigger purpose. What was it? Do you mind sharing?
Yeah, for me, it was all about my my religion. I felt like, and my faith, I felt like everything that had come to me was for a reason. And I couldn't deny the fact that there were so many doors and opportunities that were open to me. And things that didn't make sense. It didn't make sense that a random girl from Utah would get these incredible opportunities. And yet I did. And I always had a feeling that there was a reason and a purpose in those. And I always have had a desire to be an example of light and an example of just light in a dark world. And I think the entertainment world is full of light, but it's also full of darkness as well.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
Well, and I want to touch more on that once I want to stay on the path here, but I do want to touch more on it because you were put on a pedestal essentially, and light shined on you. I mean, you were in every Utah magazine, you were in every national news, paparazzi chasing you, asking you about Mormons, all these different things and your religion and stuff. One thing you mentioned, you said that you had this self-doubt. Was there something because I think a lot of people struggle with that. Where do you think that came from, and how did you best overcome that? Because I think there's some power in that story I think everybody on some level has that, right?
Yeah, and I think sometimes it's just innate. And for me, it is, and I still feel it, and I still have to learn how to overcome it on a day-to-day basis. But it is something that we're all given and born with weaknesses, and we all have something to overcome. I kind of personally believe when it comes to sports or maybe just dance that you're kind of born with either the confidence or the talent. And some really lucky people are born with both. And I was given the talent, and I always struggled to find that confidence. I always struggled to, I remember looking at like girls around me and thinking, man, how can they feel so, I don't know, comfortable? They look so comfortable, and yet for me it seems like it's such a struggle to feel that way.
Well, it's interesting because I think maybe some people are better at masking that as well. Like I'll give you an example, and this I just made me think of this as you were saying that, because I think too often we look at everybody's life. Somebody can look at my life or your life and be like, man, they really have it together. But there's so many inner struggles you still go through every day, right? And I think it's important for people, especially in a world that's like, you only see highlight reels with Instagram and everything else that's out there. And I remember like I did a Sub for Santa date auction about 6 years ago in Prep. I don't know if you were there or not. I can't remember, but you're probably out dancing in LA.
I was living in LA. Yeah.
But I wanted to raise money for Sub for Santa, and I knew in order to raise a lot of money, we had to get the most beautiful women in town that guys weren't going to get a date with otherwise, basically.
Smart.
And it was crazy because I literally handpicked who I thought were the 15 most attractive women in Salt Lake, Utah County. And all but 2 of them, literally one-on-one, they reached out to me and said, hey, I don't want to do this. I see who else is up there, and I don't think I'm pretty enough to be part of this. Wow. I mean, this was like the prettiest of the pretty girls in town were still had these insecurities. And it hit me for the first time, like, because as a guy, you just think that every girl, she knows she's the prettiest thing in the world. But everybody's going through these insecurities. Everybody has this. The only 2 that didn't were girls that were in beauty pageants, so they were used to all this. They were just like they were up for the competition. Yeah, it was kind of funny to me, but true story. They both won Miss Utah in their day. But and so like for me, it was really eye opening that, geez, if this is how these women feel, like imagine how just normal everyday people are feeling. And it kind of really helped me to have more empathy towards all women, I would say, because we all are struggling with some kind of inner demons on some level at all times.
Yeah, I mean, I have so many thoughts on that. I think there's been times in my life where I thought, man, if people just knew what I was going through right now, where they might look at my Instagram or look at my life. And this was in the height of my career when I was, going to amazing movie premieres and parties and interacting with some of the world's top talent on a daily basis. I thought, man, if girls could just know what I was going through and what I was feeling right now, they wouldn't so much desire for this life, because it's really not the source of happiness. Really, being famous is it can be a really great thing, but it can be the source of a lot of self-doubt and even more insecurity on a heightened level. But I feel like kids feel that already with Instagram. I think about what I felt in high school and the insecurities that I had. And then I'm like, man, heightened with the Instagram age and the social media age.
Yeah, I was not
and how much harder that would be.
I was not supposed to be born in this time because I would have really struggled. I know I would have.
Yeah. And I think I would have too. But yeah, and I remember just feeling like that, where I'm like, man, I wish people knew what I was struggling with. And even though my life looks so awesome and so like just the life that everybody desires, I wish that they would know that what I'm, and what's really happening inside, and what I really yearn for, which was that simplicity. I yearn for my younger self, my younger life, where things were more simple, and I didn't have, I don't know.
Well, you grew up fast. I think that's a good way to put it, right? Like, I feel like I grew up fast. I started a business at 21, and next thing I knew, I was $100,000 in debt and making deals with lawyers and things. I was just like, and to be honest, like, I kind of fell on my face a little bit. The real estate market crashed, and I still had this money from this other company, and I remember thinking like, man, my friend works at the hat store in the mall. Like, his biggest worry of the day is like, just what time he's going to the gym. And I remember there was a time when I kind of longed for that simplicity, right? Like, man, why did I force myself to grow up this fast? But I mean, looking back, I wouldn't do it differently, but I know on a smaller level, I think I understand what you're trying to say. Whereas there is a lot of responsibility and expectation that comes with early fame, like you had it. I mean, 18, 19 years old.
Yeah. And it's not to say that like you shouldn't go for your goals, you shouldn't go for your dreams. Because I 100% wouldn't be the person I am today without that. And I wouldn't have had the amazing experiences that I had. I say go for that all day, every day. But it is to show and be candid about the fact that nobody's lives are what they seem. It's so easy to compare your life to somebody else on Instagram. And most of them are not going to talk about the worst thing that happened to them that day or week or year. But it's to always remember that this life is not about our highlight reel, but it's really much more about what we go through and what we struggle. And that's a whole different conversation. But it's so easy to think that our lives are supposed to be this wonderful journey all the time. And really, without everything that I've been through, my life wouldn't be, and I wouldn't be who I am. And my life wouldn't be as rich as what it has been. And so it's really about not really getting stuck into that hole of thinking that we're supposed to be perfect and happy all the time.
Well, I'm glad you said that. One of the things I teach a lot now when I speak and when I talk to people is to kill the expectation of what your life needs to be, but put yourself in uncomfortable situations where you are forced to grow through those. So like me at 21, 22, looking back, I'm like, geez, what was I doing? I grew up fast. But like, I have so much gratitude that young Jimmy did that, because I grew into the role. You grew into the role, and then you grow into the next role, and you grow into the next role. And that's how we become whatever we're supposed to be in this life, right?
Absolutely.
But I do think the most important thing you said there is just like, this expectation of like your life's supposed to be easy or perfect or whatever it is. And a lot of the beauty of life is in the mess.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And that's my favorite.
100%.
I made these t-shirts say the beauty of life is found in the mess, because I think that so often we only want to focus on like, if I can get to that vacation, or once I'm graduated, or once I have this, then I'll be happy, or whatever else. And like, find the true beauty in the mess. Like, oh my gosh, this day is a literal, or this month just went to complete crap, or this relationship even went to complete garbage. And being able to honor that and find the beauty in that.
Yeah. And I think it's cool too, because that makes you a little bit less afraid of failure, a little bit less afraid of the bad things that can happen, because without those things that I've been through, without the times that I failed, I wouldn't have learned so much, without going for it, without, putting myself out there and saying, hey, I deserve this, without, putting, and I remember like times in my youth when I was like, let me re-audition for something. And they were like, no. And I was like, you know what? But I did it anyways. I put myself out there without being afraid of that. I think we're so much more free to do what we want to do and to find the silver lining in everything. Yeah,
beautifully said. Well, so I want to kind of jump back into your story here. You're you pass the audition. Is there multiple levels? You make the show, you're on.
Yeah, so there's the first audition, then there's the second audition where you're in front of Nigel and Mary. Definitely still nervous for that. I mean, I remember actually talking to my mom the day before, and I was like, Mom, I'm just so nervous for this. And it's funny because I was a ballroom dancer and I really had a great shot at it, yet I was still so nervous. But I remember she just told me, she said, fake it till you make it. And I was like, okay, I love that. I love that because I can fake it till I make it, you know? And so I think that really gave me a lot of confidence in a funny way. So I did that, got past Nigel, went straight to Vegas, got to Vegas, did that grueling week, very grueling, difficult. Mia Michaels was, I swear, on her own planet. But it's hard to explain. But they just make it very, very intense. And then made it to the show, and I loved it. It was one of the best experiences of my life.
Well, and you had a lot of success on So You Think You Can Dance. Made it, I think, to the 5th or 6th place.
Sixth place.
Was there a moment when you were on the show where you just kind of had this awakening of like, holy cow, like I'm in front of millions and millions of people performing what I love to do best? Or did that come later after you'd already kind of been through it?
You know, I had dreamed about that for so long, and I'd visualized myself on that stage so many times that when it finally happened, it just felt right, to be honest. It felt like the first time I went on stage, I just felt like it was where I was supposed to be. And I credit that to the preparation that I did and the fact that I really do feel like it was part of my path. But I did so much prep to be able to stand on that stage with the confidence that I had, and to overcome, like I talked about, all of those insecurities that I had, and to be able to thrive, not just survive through it, but to thrive through it. Every week was a dream, honestly. Like, I loved every single minute of it. And I know not everybody had that experience with it. But I really, really loved it. I really loved my experience.
Well, I think, you talked about how prepared you were for the moment. And I think one of the saddest things, and there's a quote somewhere, I don't know, but is when, that opportunity presents itself and you're unprepared to match the moment.
Yes.
And then the quote that, luck is when opportunity meets preparation. So you're out there, and it's like one of those things where I do certain things now and I'm so comfortable in the environment, I just have no fear. Or you watch like those guys that ride bikes on cliffs, right? And you're just like, you're insane. Yeah. But they're literally, they might as well
Free
be
solo.
riding. Yes.
Oh my
Yes,
gosh. Where you look at that and you're like, how in the world can somebody free solo El Capitan? But then you watch the movie and you realize how much preparation, 7 years of preparation. And then it's like, okay, that actually kind of makes sense.
Yeah, he might as well be in his living room at that point.
Yeah,
right? Like that's his moment.
Yeah.
And so, well, you did the Leona,
Bleeding Love.
Yes, yeah. Bleeding Love dance. That you were nominated for an Emmy for that.
Yes. So Napoleon and Tabitha, we call them Nappy Tabs, were nominated for their choreography in that. And it was amazing to be a part of that and to be able to be a part of something that was kind of like So You Think You Can Dance history. I was so nervous. That was by far the most nervous I was the whole season, because I knew that we really had something special. And so when you have that knowledge, there's now this this pressure to have to live up to that. So that was my 1 week where I was like, okay, this is big.
Yeah. Well, the cool thing about the show and about dance in general is the story that it tells, right? Like one of my first mentors said that the number one skill that you can have as a human is to be versatile, to be able to adapt to all people and all situations. So I would go to like the opera, the symphony, and I went and watched the Nutcracker one time, and I didn't understand a thing. Apparently there's a big story going on the whole time. I didn't catch most of that.
Honestly, I just watched it for the first time this year since I was a child, and it was the first time that I really understood what was going on, so you're fine.
Oh, good. No, and I was like, I'm trying here, but I just have no idea what's going on. But no, but that one, it was so cool because the story, it's every single dance move tells part of a story. And I think that's the beauty of dance. You get to express yourself in a way that there's really nothing else. Since the beginning of time, tribes and groups of people have come together to tell stories through dance.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's one thing that I absolutely adore about dance, and it really got me through some really tough times when I was a child, and so to be able to emote and express and even having bleeding love as a routine was such a dream, because it was like all those feelings that I could bring back from my childhood and all that hurt and that pain that I had used to really cope with through dance, and now I got to use all that on a national stage. Yeah, it was awesome.
I love when that song came out. I was dating a girl and I burned it onto a CD. We were still doing that back then. And
yes.
Gave it to her, but anyway.
Yes. I love it.
Well, there was some drama, I'm guessing, I don't even know, but because there was So You Think You Can Dance, and there's Dancing with the Stars, and I think Dancing with the Stars was already 5 or 6, 7 seasons in as well.
Yeah.
And were you the first one to switch over? Were you?
Yeah. So so Lacey Schwimmer had gone from So You Think to Dancing with the Stars, but she actually, so we have a year contract right after So You Think You Can Dance. You can't do anything on any other competing network, which any big TV show like that is going to have. So when Dancing with the Stars had approached me right the day I was flying home from tour on So You Think You Can Dance, they had called me and said that they wanted me on the show. So I called 19 Entertainment, which is owns So You Think You Can Dance, Stacey Weiss, and I said, "Hey, Stacey, Dancing with the Stars wants me on their show." She's like, "There's no way." She's like, "There's absolutely no way." I was like, "All right, well, would you mind just talking to Nigel about it anyways, and let's see what happens?" She said, "Fine, sure, but it's never going to happen." And so I was like, "All right, well, I'll follow up in 2 weeks if I don't hear back from you by then." Sure enough, didn't hear back. Followed up. She didn't answer. Ended up performing for Nigel at one of his Dizzy Feet Gala charity events. And I said, "Hey, Nigel, what do you think?" I was like, "Dancing with the Stars, yeah?" And he's like, "Well, all right." He's like, said some cheeky joke in a true Nigel fashion. And they ended up letting me out of my contract. And again, that was just another thing that I felt like was a blessing and very fortuitous. But I was the first person that they actually let out of their contract up until that point. So up until that point, there was a very big rivalry, and a few years after that, there was a big rivalry between the two until I think they finally realized that they could help each other. And that, So You Think, by letting us go on Dancing with the Stars, that it actually looked better for them.
Lifted their profile, that some of the people that, even if they took 6th on their show, made it to Dancing with the Stars.
Yeah. So it ended up being a more working relationship between the two, but at the time, it was not that way. So
well, and then you ended up, 8 seasons, I think, on Dancing with the Stars. Is that correct? And so I want to get into a little bit. You dance with these different Michael Bolton and Ty Murray, the rodeo guy, and all these different stars that you're performing with. Was that, by that point, did you already have some experience being around celebrities? Was it still uncomfortable for you?
No, not at all. My first partner was Ty Murray, and so Jewel was his wife. I remember the first time, I don't think about this very often, but we were in Texas and we went to dinner for the first time. And I remember it was my first, I was 19, and it was my first time being at dinner with Jewel, this huge, amazing, world renowned singer, and it was kind of surreal. It was cool. So we actually spent 3 weeks in Texas with Ty and Jewel. Jewel was actually supposed to be on the show, and she ended up getting injured the day before the premiere, so she had to back out. But I was really thrown into the world, and it was a little bit of culture shock, being an Orem, Utah girl.
I was going to say, you went from small town Orem and you moved to LA, and literally you had the paparazzi trying to get one sentence from you on camera, and they start asking you about your faith. They start, following you around. Was it ever uncomfortable to have, so much attention on you after just coming from little Orem?
Yes and no. It was overwhelming. But at the same time, I really held true to my purpose, especially in the beginning when it was so overwhelming, when it was a lot happening all at once. I really had to hold fast to what I knew and what I knew about myself and what I knew about what I could handle. So yeah, I mean, it was a little bit uncomfortable, yet at the same time, like even with that the first paparazzi encounter I had, I was like, yes, I'm prepared for this. Like, I'm ready for this. So in a little bit naive as well, but in my young 19-year-old self, I was really, I was bright-eyed and ready for the experiences.
Well, I'm sure it helped the fact that you are a stage performer. You're used to being in front of everybody doing your art, right?
Yeah.
Did you have anybody in particular that kind of took you under their wing, any mentors, anything like that? Or did you just kind of figure it out as you went?
That was one of the challenges of being out there, was that the major challenge that I had was that I felt very alone. I was ready, and in the same vein, I also wasn't ready in other ways. When I first moved out there, I mean, I remember having a huge, huge panic attack, and anxiety attack. And I really didn't, I didn't know that feeling. I hadn't known that feeling up until that point. So I say I was ready. I was ready, and then I wasn't at the same time. There was conflicting feelings that I had. But yeah, so I really I embraced what I could. But yeah.
Was there ever a point when you were like, I'm going to turn back. I don't want to, I mean, because anxiety can totally overcome you if you let it. Was there a point where you almost turned back at all?
Yes, there were several points actually. And again, like being a homegrown girl from Utah, moving out, I had felt like, because I traveled so much and I was in the dance world so much and I had come across so many different people, that I was ready for that experience. And then I got out there and found that it was harder than I thought it was going to be. And so there were several points within that first month that I was out there that I was like, I'm going to go home. I'm going to turn back around. But then there were several things that were playing into it. My perfectionistic personality type. I was very, and still learning not to be this way, but very much wanting to control every aspect of my reality. And I think I thought that I could, if I could just be mentally tough enough, that I could control every aspect. And sometimes being mentally tough is realizing that you can't control every aspect and knowing that everything's going to be okay anyways. But I couldn't accept that at that time. I couldn't accept that I couldn't control everything. And so it was this battle in my mind. And had I gone to and saw a therapist at the time, I'm sure she would have been like, just relax, like, let it go, calm down. But in my psychology at that point, what I'd learned how to be successful was controlling my reality. And so I couldn't let that go at that point in my life, because I was terrified at what might happen if I did let it go. Could I be successful? Could I accomplish the things that I wanted to accomplish? And if not, I don't have a strong family support to fall back on. I don't have a strong financial support to fall back on. I can't fail. So in my head, all these things are going through my head, and it was like this pressure just building, like a
the water level coming up on you.
Yeah, and I could feel it, and I was like, no, press it down, it's gonna be okay, I got this, kept trying to control it, and then one night it just bursted open. I remember it was 2 a.m. and my roommates were asleep, and I started walking around my house, and I was like, it's fine, I'm going to be okay. I'm going to be fine. I've got faith. I'm strong. I've been through things. I know who I am. I know all these things. And I couldn't stop it. And I had my first panic attack. And oh my goodness, it was the scariest feeling I've ever felt. I've never, to that point, I don't know if you've ever experienced something like it, but you feel like you're going to die. Yeah, and anyone who's been through it is like, I thought I was going to die.
And it hits you. It's so bizarre because it hits you and you're just like, what is going on?
Yes.
Like, why am I like feeling like
out of nowhere, all of a sudden you were fine, and then you think you're going to die literally the next second. And I was like on my hands and knees in my roommate's room, because I thought, if something bad happens to me, she needs to know. She wakes up and she's like, hey, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. Go back to sleep. Which doesn't make sense now thinking about it, because I was like,
you're on the floor.
I need you to know that I'm not okay, but it's fine. Go back to sleep. So as I'm on the floor, literally in her bedroom, and I just remember my whole body was shaking, and I remember this weight, and I remember feeling like darkness was just encompassing me. And I had nothing to reference that to, except that if you're, in the LDS faith, that the only experience that I had to reference that to was Joseph Smith. And so I thought, oh, this is a spiritual test. I can do this. I'm strong. And so that messed with my head a lot, because, God doesn't expect you to be perfect all the time. We know he knows that we're going to go through things. But in my head, it was like, no, I need to be strong. I can't let this feeling overcome me. And so, so that was like my first like crazy break. And the first time that my world just broke. And it was very scary, because I didn't know how to be successful without this perfect world. And this
you didn't know that it was
put together
okay
thing.
to not be okay.
Yeah. Oh no. Yeah. Because in my head, my alternate reality was to, and some of the trauma that I'd been through as a child was too scary to allow in my life. So no, like, not being okay was just not even an option.
Well, and on top of yours, you now had people publicly knew who you were, and so you were like even more the spotlight is shining on you. Like, it's not like you can just go reach out to whoever at this point to get help either.
Yeah, and I had anticipated Dancing with the Stars coming up, and for me, it was a battle of, I know that I wasn't the best one in the room. I knew that there were other dancers that were better than me. How am I going to handle this? Because I can't control it, right? Because I'm not the best in the room. And so you think I kind of knew that what I had to offer was great. And Dancing with the Stars, it just threw me for a loop. And I was not expecting it. And I just didn't know that was going to be a part of my experience. So
what helped you come out of that? Was dancing part of what helped you come out of that, or how did you kind of get to the point where you were? Because you went for 8 years. Obviously, you overcame that.
It's taken years, to be honest. Initially, I did what I knew how to do, which was use all of the trauma to motivate me and to push me, and then when I just got tired of running away from everything and dealing with all the pressure and not dealing with it in a very healthy way, I let go. And when I let go, there was a sense of relief, but also it was really, really scary, because again, I didn't know how to be successful to that point and without that feeling of control.
Well, and I think that's part of the dance of life, is using our trauma or using our pain from the past to push us, to drive us, right? Like I hung on to something for 20 years to push me that I'd forgotten about it, and it came to me in a meditation session. And, I'll just share it real quick, but my dad, when I was 14 years old, he wanted me to get held back in school a year because I wasn't good enough to make the high school team, he thought.
Yeah.
And I told him no as a 14-year-old. It was a lot of pressure. I finally told him no. And he told me to my face, well, you're not good enough to play baseball then. And I wrote under my hat, you're not good enough. And I literally looked at that for 2 years. Like, that's horrible trauma for a child, right? Yes. But that you're not good enough drove me to do a lot of things to be successful.
Yeah.
And so now, as I'm kind of in my 30s and I'm more like about the art of fulfillment, trying to just make sure that I'm living a fulfilled life, I've been able to let that go. And it has killed a little bit of my drive, but in such a healthy way. But it's that balance, that dance of using that pain, using that trauma, but also not letting it consume your happiness.
Well, and I think it's only sustainable for so long. I think I kind of always had that, and I've expressed it. I've always had a little bit of that as well. And that wasn't from anybody else necessarily, but I think something that I was just born with, that this sense of, I don't know if I'm good enough. And I know that drove me. But it's only sustainable for so long until you have to learn how to be successful in a healthy way. until you learn about self-compassion and self-love, and that is sustainable, and that's you'll find so much more fulfillment through that, and happiness, and just settlement in yourself, as opposed to, pushing and pushing and pushing and trying to make your mark and trying to prove that you're good enough to everybody else. Right. And when you can just say, I'm good enough for myself, and what I am is enough. And I think it's a big wave right now, which is great, but it really does. There's so much.
Well, and I gave away 100 books for Christmas. Brene Brown, Braving the Wilderness, because it really is, if you can get rid of that expectation and shame, and just if you can be okay with yourself and love yourself, like you said, that's finding the motivation from a healthy place.
Yeah. So, and that's where, when we come back to, that's what I'm now learning. And when it goes back to what I went through, it's taken me years, really, because I was so stubborn in not wanting to give that up. I did not want to give up that idea of this perfection because it felt good. Like, it felt really, really good. And it was like a little taste of heaven. But we're not perfect beings, and we never will be in this life. And realizing that has taken me a long time, that's okay. And it's actually a lot more beautiful to be broken and to be humble and not that I wasn't like humble, but to be okay with not being okay, you know.
Well, and I think there's a culture in Utah especially that kind of drives that, you know, you need to be perfect, you're not enough on your own. A few of these concepts that are out there. One of the things that you did on Dancing with the Stars is you really were able to maintain very strongly, like, hey, these are my morals, this is my principles, this is my religion. But there's some things that I wanted to touch on, and I hope you're okay if I go here, but the very essence of the dance world is very much, there's a lot of very pro-gay sentiment in the dance world. You're around a lot of homosexual males especially. And so you are exposed to some things that maybe living in Orem or somebody just random person in Utah isn't as exposed to as much. Yeah. And so you have to find a way to balance, you know, your religious side, which is has very strong beliefs about that, with these people you're meeting. And, you know, for me, I know, and I think you do an excellent job, as good as anybody I've ever seen, of really putting a light on the way that you should treat other people in all situations. But was that difficult? Would people knowing you're Mormon and the Prop 8's going on while you're in California when you first got out there? I think it was about that same time.
It was, I was 2008. So that was right when Prop 8 was going on. I remember a friend of mine asking me, and this is before I ever moved out to LA, he said, how do you feel about gays? You know, you're in that industry. And he's like, I have a hard time with this because I don't really know what to think. And I said, you know, I love my gay friends. And I don't believe that Heavenly Father or that, you know, we as a whole are not supposed to love them. And yes, it contradicts with what we believe, but that doesn't mean that we should love them any less. And I've always felt very strongly about that because I believe that that's how Christ would treat them. I believe that that's what God wants for us. And that he wants them to feel loved. We all have things, you know, and we all have our own struggles. And does that mean that anybody deserves to be any less loved because of that? Absolutely not. You know, I would feel so sad if someone was like, you struggle with anxiety, you kind of suck. Because I'm already doing that to myself, right?
Do you think it's I guess the balance of it, because you performed at Love Loud, the concert to support, I guess gay, but it's more like the depression side of it, right? The fact to shine a light on kind of what happens, especially in Utah and things like that. And so you performed at Love Loud. Did you get any backlash for that, or was that?
No.
Oh, good.
I think that our culture and the world as a whole is doing so much better with understanding them more, understanding what the struggle is, and understanding. You know, I've had in-depth conversations with good friends of mine who are gay, and this was back in like 2009 when it was still really, really kind of new. But I remember one of them just saying, do you think I would ever choose this life? You know, I would never choose to like feel ridiculed this way. And that really like, and I always felt loved anyways, but it really shifted my mind in the sense of how they feel. And how that might feel to be in their situation.
Well, I remember I went to a Tony Robbins event where he talked in depth on masculinity and femininity and how we have, well, every man and woman has both, but we are either very much our natural, innate. Most men are masculine, most women are feminine, but in situations where somebody is born, you know, a male is born with more feminine, like a gay person. And I remember he did this exercise where he's talking about Braveheart and William Wallace, and he does this thing, and every single male, I mean, there's 2,500 people in the room, all at the same time, jump up, every man with masculine energy, and did this thing. And I remember looking around the room, and it wasn't planned. We weren't prompted to do this, but every single man jumped out of his chair. I'm telling you, every single one. Wow. And I looked around, and there was only 2 dudes that didn't jump out of their chair. And they were very obviously these 2 gay guys. And I was like, it hit me for the first time as strong as ever, is like, you're born. Like, that's how they were born. That absolutely 100%. And so for me, it was like, I think the gay issue in general has kind of gone away. I think in Utah, we still hear it a lot because there's still this like uncomfortability with the church and things like that. And that's where it hit me, like, okay, somebody that's absolutely born a certain way and the struggles that come with that in society. Thank goodness that in 2019, really it's better for gays, minorities, women, whatever group than it's probably ever been in the history of humanity, right? I mean, that was the first group that Hitler targeted, you know, and things like that. And so when you really look at it in the entire compass, I think, but people like yourself, that you're not afraid to go and perform at Love Loud. I think that speaks volumes because people know how active you are in the LDS religion. And so I think there's just, I guess, what advice would you give people that aren't still quite sure? It's just, and I always say to people like my liberal friends, I say, listen, the best thing you can do is give time for people to adapt a little bit. Like, we've been told that things are a certain way our whole life. So if you kind of give us a chance, like, don't just, we're not all wrong or all right. Like, give them a chance to come over the fence a little bit, right?
Yeah. And I think that's kind of it's a great point, because I think as much as I'm conservative myself, I feel like sometimes liberals are very much wanting us to be open-minded, yet, you know, you're asking people to really change the way that they were raised. You're asking people to change, whole psychology that their world is built upon. You have to be a little bit understanding of that as well. And I was lucky enough my parents were great with teaching me love and compassion. But as far as advice, I mean, people that may be having a hard time with it, kind of just what I said, I believe that everyone deserves to be loved. Everyone deserves to be loved, and that's really all it is.
It really
all
is
you
that
need
simple.
is love.
Like it really is that simple.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Well, another funny aspect I wanted to touch on that had to do with when you were on Dancing with the Stars is for a very conservative Mormon girl, you posed with Ty Murray in the Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue.
Yes.
So you've got to, how did that come about? How did they get you to agree to that? And by the way, awesome.
Thank you.
It's so cool. What girl gets to perform dancing in front of 25 million people and be in the Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue?
I was so excited. And I think it all comes back to, and if you are religious, this is what I would say. If you're not, that's great too. But for me, it always comes back to my personal relationship with my Father in heaven, and what I feel like He's given me, and the platform that He's given me, and He's given it to me for a reason. And to turn down something that is like that big, I don't believe that would have been in His will, because I can choose to look at that and do it in my own way and be a light. And it's, to be honest, like, there's some really, really great people that are involved with that magazine. Really wonderful, just like kind, really great people. But I didn't feel bad at all about that. No, to be honest, I was asked to be in Maxim magazine. And I was offered the cover, and I turned that down because I felt like that was a different feel. I don't know. I felt
well, and I think
fine.
You touched on something. I think in life, nothing is black and white. My whole theory on all commandments, all rules of life, whatever you want to call it, everything's gray. And so it all comes back to intent and motivation, right?
Yeah.
And so, like you said, the opportunity to do something like that, how did the opportunity present itself anyway to you? Yeah,
they just called me. So they did a section in that magazine of athletes. It was kind of an athlete year. So they had Lindsey Vonn, skier. They had some snowboarders in there. I think it was the same year as the Winter Olympics, or that was coming up. And so they had athletes from Dancing with the Stars. And yeah, it was innocent. I mean, I was posing with my dance partner who's married. I mean, there wasn't a whole lot that could come out of that. Plus I was 19 and not very sexual at that time. And, so it was a great experience.
You've got to have that like on your resume of all times though. Like, I was one of the models.
I probably should.
Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue.
I probably should. Although there's a lot of things that I do here locally that they would probably be like, Really?
It'd be good for him to know it.
Yeah, it probably would be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No. Well, and then you had your last year in 2013. And so has it been an awkward adjustment going back to normal life?
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, it was, and it was because my experience was so intense, and it was wonderful, and it was awful, and it was amazing, and it was terrible. I mean, it was everything, you know. It was the best moments of my life where I'd felt my power, and I'd recognized how much you can do when you believe in yourself, and how much you can do for me with my Father in heaven, and how much power I felt Him give me, and how I mean, I could do amazing things in front of 24 million people. Coming from a girl who really doubted herself, that was a huge thing, you know? It was a huge thing for me to come from this girl who hated going to dance class because I couldn't be in a room full of other kids that I didn't know. And then being on national television and thriving in front of 24 million people every week, that was thrilling. You know, and that was incredible. And I know that I couldn't have done that without this inner innate sense of who I was, innate sense of who I was as a daughter of God, and this innate sense of strength that you can do hard things, and your mind is incredibly powerful. And then I also felt the flip side of that, where I started really thinking too much and doubting myself, and I felt debilitating fear. I felt the wide, the spectrum from the best and the worst. And there is opposition in all things, right? So as good as it was, I also felt the opposition of that. It was really terrifying at times, of like just my own mind and how scary that can be. And anybody who deals with doubt or anxiety or panic attacks can, kind of understand how that felt. Needless to say, it was an exhausting experience. By the end of 4 years, when I'd felt like my psychology was broken, I was trying to figure out how to move forward, and I thrived, and then I didn't, and it was just all the things. I was done. I was exhausted. So, yet I didn't really know what to do. I didn't know what I needed to do to like become happy again. I was empty by the end of 4.5 years of being there. So there's 2 seasons every year, right. 8 seasons. I felt empty, and I felt like I was so far away from who I had been. And at 23, that's like kind of weird to say. Like I've like experienced a lot and really, really intense experiences at that point. And I knew I needed a change, but I didn't know what that was. And so for me, it was a really spiritual thing. It was a really religious thing where I felt like, I just said a prayer, and I felt like my Father in heaven had to take me out of that situation. And which is what happened. And so that was the last. I wasn't asked to be on the show again, which at the time was devastating. And looking back, I couldn't have done it I was so done. So it was a huge blessing now looking back, and I can see how it all worked out, and how it's working out. But I moved home for 2 years. I thought I was going to get married, and then I didn't, and that was devastating, and that was hard. But I still didn't want to do anything with dance because I'd still had all these intense experiences that I hadn't processed yet, and that was terrifying, thinking of having to process that. And so this is all, and so I'm like not even thinking about the fact that I'm like giving up dance because I'm just like trying to like be okay and like live my life. Yeah. And so it's taken years to like process that like loss of dance and that loss of like my career and that loss of those experiences that were incredible. That loss and feeling, there were times that I felt like I'd never have that again.
Well, those were some high highs, right?
Yeah. It was a lot of processing. It's taken years. And I went to therapy. I started going to therapy like a year ago, to kind of work through some of those experiences and kind of recognize everything that played into kind of that break that I'd had. Because for so long I really didn't understand, and again, I didn't want to let go of that once feeling of perfection that I had. somewhat perfection, unrealistic perfection. But so it's been an interesting transition, and it's been long. It's been so much longer than I would have imagined, you know, and I'm 29 now, and I'm finally getting to a point where I feel like I can see why everything happened the way it did. I can see a bright future. I can see the growth that I've had, but it took me 7 years to finally be able to recognize that, which was frustrating for me because I came from a background where it was every year I was growing, I was pushing, I was improving in dance, and I was one of the best in what I did. And so to take 7 years to like finally process things and go through things and finally get to the point where I'm feeling like I'm on the other side has been incredibly frustrating and hard, but cool. And like, I'm finally seeing how cool things work out. And, you know, I think at one point in my life, I thought that everything was done, you know, and I thought that I was kind of done in many ways. And it's been amazing to see how life works out. You know, things always work out, even when you're at your most broken state. It always works out, you know, it always pans out.
No, again, it goes back to kind of sum up everything you just said. Like, some of the beauty of of life is found in the mess, right?
Oh yeah.
And I think it is like we go through these stages of our lives, and you feel like in the moment of that stage, it is everything, and then it's done, and it's like, well, now what? But to understand and to get to a point now where you're looking again over the horizon, you've climbed up that new mountain. That's fun. That's exciting. It'll be exciting to see where everything goes.
Thank you. It is exciting. It's weird to like be like, yeah, I can see a bright future, because honestly, for so long it was just bleak. It was murky, and it was just didn't make sense. Things didn't make sense for so long. And yeah, I mean, anyone who I feel like is going through something similar, I can be like, oh, I kind of understand you. I never thought that I would find myself in that situation of just feeling so lost, because I always knew who I was. I always had such a strong sense of myself and my purpose and what I wanted, and you know, and doors were opened and opportunities were opened, and I never thought I would find myself in that position. So it's given me compassion.
Well,
and it's been great.
Empathy and compassion. I think one of the things that people are going to take away from this more than anything is when we're willing to put ourselves in a vulnerable state. I know for me personally, I've always benefited from that. And you've touched people that you'll never even meet or know that have listened to this, that you were exactly what they needed to hear. And you're going to find the blessings as you keep, you know, you've been vulnerable and you're letting yourself grow through that. It's fun. It's cool to see, and
thank you.
I congratulate you. So thank you again for coming on.
Thank you so much. No, I hope that it does help people. It gives some purpose to the mess.
To just, you know, you've literally done the entire 5 lifetimes worth of highs and lows, and I appreciate your spirit about it.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Chelsie.